Next up, welcome to Queer News Tonight's Q&A on LGBTQ plus health and pandemic. Since February 2020, this segment has been unique in America, answering your LGBTQ plus community questions about our unique health needs. We are proud to have Queer News Tonight health anchor, Dr. Howard Grossman.
He is an American pioneer in HIV and AIDS medical treatment and was the executive director of the American Academy of HIV Medicine. He is nationally recognized medical expert and proud member of the LGBTQ plus community.
Well, good evening, Dr. Grossman. And before we move into viewer questions, we want to hear your thoughts about what you saw in this week's health news for our community.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things that came out this week was the discussion about booster shots. Yesterday, there was an article that appeared in the Lancet journal from an international group of specialists recommending against routine booster shots for people. And I think, they made, just so people know, they made some very important points about the fact that we don't know for sure if booster shots are necessary. We do know that that people do well months and months after the initial vaccines, and they make a point that we really need to get vaccine to the unvaccinated people and to poor people in the rest of the world. I think all of those are really important points. But I will tell you that my colleagues around the country that I talk to or that I see on Facebook are all getting booster shots. And I think many millions of people in this country are already talking with their feet and their arms and going for booster shots, especially people who, clearly people who are immunosuppressed, it's a good idea to do. But I think anybody over 65, all the people where the vaccine might not be as effective. Clearly in a place like Florida, where so many are unvaccinated and taking no precautions, I want to have the highest antibody levels I can have. And I'm not waiting for the trials to finish. I think trials are very important for making sure that we do the right thing, but sometimes you have to jump ahead.
Howard, I have so many friends that follow this segment in LGBT community, LGBTQ community, and you zero in on the disturbing nature of the Lancet report because it's just being summarized like popcorn as opposed to really diving deep into their observation. Broadly, you've just said that they're saying that the clinical is not absolute in terms of the value of the shots, and you've just corrected it in terms of what most of your medical colleagues are saying. But broadly, the conclusion is that it would be better to use more vaccine around the world among those that are not vaccinated or don't have access, to give them the access to the vaccine. Because that would, in a preventative measure, prevent a mutation, for example. But how is that?
That was really what they wanted to do. That they would force compulsory licensing on companies like Pfizer, so that countries around the world could build their own vaccine factories and be turning out vaccine in huge numbers.
That's and you, of course, you get to it instantly. I just want to, from your point of view, is there anything really in terms of what Lancet's recommendation was that America or Americans can do on an individual basis? That decision in terms of vaccine production, et cetera, is so much bigger than us. So as a result, as it applies to us personally in the LGBTQ community, is the recommendation to get the booster or not get the booster?
I think if people don't feel comfortable getting the booster, they're going to, for the most part, be protected. I think even when we see this sort of waning of antibodies, there is still protection, and we forget that there is, and they mention the other part of the immune system that remember the memory cells that remember these infections and that would fight. So I do think that the vaccines are far more effective than some of the panic porn TV people are putting out there about Delta. But everybody knows people who have had breakthrough infections. Very, very few of those people end up in the hospital, and an incredibly small number have ended up dying. I mean, really tiny number. But you know, I think given the resistance to vaccines in this country, you know, especially for people with HIV, for people who are on immunosuppressive drugs, you know, all those drugs you see on TV where they tell you to worry about getting tested for tuberculosis, the ones for psoriasis, the ones for other things like that, you know, those are all immunosuppressive drugs. So those people should probably get a booster. And then I think people over 65, where clearly the vaccine has not been as efficacious. And then the older people are, the more necessary it is. Now, it's not clear that that booster is going to help in, you know, tremendous ways. And I do support the whole idea of studies, and we might need to change what we say depending on the outcome of those studies. But, you know, right now, I think that, to me, the situation demands action.
Okay, you're heard loud and clear there. So with that, in our Q&A, let's jump right into tonight's questions.
Hi, Doc. A child in Tampa was diagnosed with multi-system inflammatory syndrome believed to have been caused by COVID-19. Do you think that we'll see other new symptoms and illnesses in children?
Well, you know, they've just the multi-system inflammatory syndrome was first described back in the first quarter of 2020, or 2020. So this is not new. There have been about 4,000 cases, and you know, truthfully, that was, you know, almost a year and a quarter, a year and a half ago, and we haven't heard about any new syndromes. It's always possible when you're dealing with viruses, but I think at this point, this far into it, we've seen where the problems lie. It's still very rare for kids, but it can be devastating. I think if you read the story about the kid in Tampa, it was a real touch and go situation for his mom and for him.
Hey, Dr. Grossman, it's Jeff Oliverio. It's being reported that some Southeast Asian countries are treating COVID as endemic instead of pandemic. What does this mean?
Hi, Jeff. So, endemic, you know, what they're basically talking about is they're treating it like we have to, you know, like so many Republican governors are saying, we have to live with it and letting it go wild. So endemic meaning that it's going to be in the population, it's not going anywhere, it's going to be killing people, you know, that's just the way it is. Rather than treating it like an pandemic that you actually try to do something about. You know, I think first of all we have to realize that in Far Eastern cultures, life has less individual life has less value in many ways. You know, people are often living this life for the next life. And you know, I think we see every day in some of the poorer countries in South Asia and Southeast Asia, millions of people living in poverty, billions of people living in poverty, and just, you know, with short lifespans and living with all kinds of disease. So I think there's a very different attitude than I think the way we as Americans about that our government feels about our individual lives. And so I really think it's difficult to translate to here. But clearly, I mean, there are Republican governors like our own Governor Death Sentence who, you know, ignore this and let it spread. Somehow it's going to get better. You know, it's all about the economy for those people. But for people, it's going to crash the economy.
Yeah, for sure. And Scott, you have a question about children.
Yes. Nearly half of all new COVID cases in Maine are. Do you expect this to be common as schools go back to in-person learning?
I think it's happening everywhere. You see reports about COVID spreading where there are not vaccine mandates, and you know, for kids over 12, and masks. So in those places where people are, where the older kids have to be vaccinated, they're not seeing this spread of COVID. But in the places where that's not happening, you know, you read about cases every single day, and it's heartbreaking. The children's hospitals are filling up, the children's ICUs are filling up, the children are dying, and that these people still think children can't be affected.
Well,
you know, I really hope they're talking about having the pediatric vaccine data by Halloween, and I think that's going to be really important.
Yeah, let's hope for that. Well, that is tonight's Queer News, this evening's Queer News Tonight Q&A on LGBTQ plus health and the pandemic. We are here every Tuesday with Dr. Howard Grossman to answer your questions. To our viewers not here in South Florida, in the Windy City, that Dr. Grossman is moving to Chicago. He just could not IML all year long, apparently.
It was snow. It was snow, Al.
Market days. You wanted to live market days. And
Right.
he is going to be joining the team at the Howard Brown Health Center, the largest LGBTQ plus health center in the Midwest. So as always, we thank you to be with us, because you're chained to this gig with me until this is over. And you've said tonight it probably is never going to be over. So you're chained to me forever, even in Chicago.
Oh, very happy. Especially chained. There you go.
See, it is IML.
But I'll be an hour. I'll be an hour early. I'll be an hour earlier. Remember that.
Exactly. Well, Howard's going to be helping one of the most important LGBTQ health providers in the country, and we wish you all the luck and have a great time. And oh, by the way, dread us doing this segment in February, because I'm going to be rubbing that you are minus 19 and I am 72 degrees.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks for everything you do for us, Howard. LGBTQ plus news for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need Happening Out television network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.